Mary Lindley Murray had an unusual situation. While she was a supporter of American independence, her husband was loyal to the British. Knowing that the British troops had landed to trap retreating Americans, Mary invited the British commanders to tea. Her hospitality stalled the British long enough for the Americans to pass by New York safely. Thus, a woman using her brains instead of her brawn helped defeat the British and hasten independence. Martha was extremely wealthy, far before being First Lady. George found this to be one of her many attractive qualities. He wanted to marry another woman, but she was already married. He wanted to be an officer in the British Army. They rejected him. By marrying Martha Curtis, George Washington became a wealthy landowner. When it came time to choose sides for the war, Martha was torn between friends who were loyalists and those who wanted independence. When war arrived and George was made Commander-in-Chief of Patriot Forces, Martha visited him whenever she could. Martha Washington spent most of her time at Mount Vernon in Virginia during the war. When George was elected president, she moved to New York, then the nation's capital. There she was said to be a very gracious host to all visitors. Although she didn't take an active role in fighting in the Revolutionary War, she was said to take great care of George. George Washington once said that a wife should have good sense, a good disposition, good reputation, and financial means. He found all of those in Martha. Elizabeth Griscom, better known as Betsy Ross, is credited with making the first American flag. Her husband, John Ross, died in an explosion while guarding ammunition in January of 1776. Later that year, she met with George Washington, George Ross, and Robert Morris. This meeting led to the sewing of the first American flag. Sybil Ludington is known as the female Paul Revere, but what many don't know is that Sybil's ride was twice as far as Paul's. It became necessary because the British had attacked Danbury, Connecticut, a Patriot supply center. They were then headed to Fredericksburg, New York. A young soldier arrived at Sybil's father's house. Colonel Ludington was in charge of the local volunteers. Needing someone to go at once to gather troops, Sybil jumped at the chance. She rode to many of the villages, informing everyone what was happening. Thanks to her bravery, the Patriots were able to force the British back to Long Island Sound. From there, the British sailed away. Molly Hayes Macaulay was essentially the water boy of battle. One day while on duty near Monmouth, New Jersey, she saw her husband shot in the arm. She rushed to his side, and then decided she'd take his position at the cannon, firing several rounds at the oncoming British forces. Her bravery and good aim earned the respect of other soldiers, and her actions impressed General Washington, who commissioned her as Sergeant Molly Pitcher. Martha Bratton was an arsonist. She blew up a storehouse. She injured others, but she did this to help her country. Martha and her husband were left in charge of gunpowder during the war. With her husband away and hearing that the British were planning to steal the gunpowder, Martha set a trap, blowing up the building as the British soldiers arrived. She even admitted doing the dastardly deed when captured. She was let go and spared by a British officer from severe punishment. What many think makes her one of the war's most interesting people, and not just women, was she would later set up a hospital and nurse both British and American soldiers, in protest of the cruelty of war. Robert Shirtlife enlisted in the 4th Massachusetts Regiment in 1778, except his name wasn't really Robert and he wasn't even a man. Deborah Sampson had cut her hair short and wrapped a cloth firmly around her chest. So, disguised as a man, she enlisted in the Revolutionary Army using her brother's name. Deborah fought for her country for years. She was wounded in battle, but eventually coming down with a fever is what would ruin her disguise. The doctor treating her had discovered her secret, but helped her keep it until the war ended. After being discovered, Deborah was still given an honorable discharge. Deborah's husband was of course the only man to receive a widower's pension from the Revolutionary War.
Like we always do at this time, I go for mine, I got to shine. Now throw your hands up in the sky. I go for mine.